Hey everyone, welcome back to Inside A Course in Miracles. I'm Adrienne Murchison, and this podcast is an extension of Let's Start Healing, which means I want to say we have more in common than we think, and what we have in common can change the world. And there are a couple of different things that I want to bring up to you to lead up to what I want to share with you. And one thing that's been coming up for me is the need for you to protect your peace. And I think this has been on my mind because actually my close friend Stephanie and I are launching a podcast called Shifting into Peace. So I've been thinking about peace a lot. Obviously, we all want peace in our lives. And it is important to protect your peace. Do you listen to or watch the news right before you go to sleep? Or do you reach for your phone as soon as you wake up in the morning? Or do you turn on the TV as soon as you wake up in the morning? And that one is pretty hard for me because I can automatically reach for my phone about this or that in the mornings. At night, I'm pretty good about protecting my peace. I was talking with a friend not long ago, and she, like many of us, get caught up in the political events of the world. But it is important to be able to set boundaries around those things, around the information that we take in, whether it's politics, whether it's social media, whether it's noise, period. It's important to set boundaries around that and to protect your peace and know what it is that can bring you into peace. You know, for some people, it is turning on a comedy, something that is going to make them laugh or not make them think too hard. For me, it's something like music, or it could be me putting on something that I think a spiritual teacher that I feel is going to bring me into, a higher vibration. But it is important to figure out what is it that protects your state of mind and your well-being and keeps you relaxed and even keel and is not going to raise you into a space where you feel negativity, especially before you go to bed at night or when you're winding down from your day. Do not keep that going. Don't let that noise keep going. It's important to protect yourself. And so, in thinking about that, today I was listening to this song that I really, really enjoy listening to, a gospel song, and it really helps me to feel connected. And just my whole spirit inside just, oh God, vibing really high, just feeling so good. And I started thinking about, wouldn't it be interesting, like this feeling that I was having in the moment is a feeling that all of us either have or can have at any point in time if we feel really, really connected to God. And that it's a feeling that it's a feeling that words can't capture appropriately. And I started thinking, wouldn't it be interesting if that was normal? If we all walked around feeling this knowing and this high love for this divine entity, whatever we want to call that divine being, if we all walked around and that was our normal state, and then when we're feeling the way that we normally feel throughout our everyday lives, that feeling was not normal, was not regular. And when we felt that feeling, we knew we were sick. Wouldn't that be interesting? So we're always in this high state of love, and that's the normal, this high vibration. is our norm. And then when we feel something lower, when we start feeling what we normally feel throughout the day, when we start noticing that person that looked at us a certain way, and that person that said something to us in a way that rubbed us wrong, that we start understanding that that's when we feel sick. That is illness, because we've gotten away from who we are and what we know. And that's really what is true. We walk around in a state that we consider normal. I mean, it is normal. We've made it normal, but that's not real. And I was also thinking about how no matter what our relationship is with God, for the sake of argument, let's just say all of us, there are people, walking the earth, many people who are atheists, and they don't believe in God. They don't believe in a higher power. So let's say that for the sake of what I'm about to say, everyone listening just believes in God, right? You believe in God, and you have a knowing that God exists, right? Why is it that we don't connect with God all the time? Like, we know that there's this higher being, this divine power. And why isn't that our regular mode of operation, to be in connection with that, like real connection? And my answer is we've conditioned ourselves to make what we experience day to day to be normal, and to be real and to be true. But we already know that God exists. And we know that what we experience largely from day to day, that's not true if it's not in love, because that's what God is. God is love. So, what I want to share is a section in A Course in Miracles that is called Grandeur versus Grandiosity. And it is in chapter 9. Before I actually bring you that, I want to share a little from the section before Grandeur versus Grandiosity. And that's called the two evaluations. And it really speaks to a little bit of what I just brought up. And then the other section also speaks to our ego, and how our ego is not love. Our ego is anything but love. And our ego exists. We have a lot of ideas around what the ego is and what the ego represents. For the purposes of A Course in Miracles, the ego does not mean you any good, according to the A Course in Miracles. So I'm going to start with the two evaluations and share a little from that. And it starts out, God's will is your salvation. And that's the undoing of guilt and the undoing of illusions, the undoing of anything that is not love. Would he not have given you the means to find it? Salvation, this undoing. If he wills you to have it, he must have made it possible and easy to obtain it. God wills you perfect happiness now. Is it possible that this is now also your will? And is it possible that this is not also the will of your brothers? Consider then, in this joint will, you are all united, and in this only. There may be disagreement on anything else, but not on this. This then is where peace abides. And you abide in peace when you so decide. Yet you cannot abide in peace unless you accept the atonement, because the atonement is the way to peace. And in this book, the atonement is the undoing. The atonement is Jesus, who anything that you think you did, Jesus has atoned for that. So you don't have to pay for that. It's already been done. All right. The reason is very simple and so obvious that it is often overlooked. The ego is afraid of the obvious, since obviousness is the essential characteristic of reality. Yet you cannot overlook it unless you are not looking. It is perfectly obvious that if the Holy Spirit looks with love on all he perceives, he looks with love on you. His evaluation of you is based on his knowledge of what you are. And so he evaluates you truly. And this evaluation must be in your mind because the Holy Spirit is in your mind. The ego is also in your mind. You are human. You're human. You are a human being. The ego is also in your mind because you have accepted it there. Its evaluation of you, however, is the ego's evaluation of you, however, is the exact opposite of the Holy Spirit's, because the ego does not love you. It is unaware of what you are and wholly mistrustful of everything it perceives, because its perceptions are so shifting. The ego is therefore capable of suspiciousness at best and viciousness at worst. That is its range. It cannot exceed it because of its uncertainty, and it can never go beyond it because it can never be certain. You then have two conflicting observations or evaluations of yourself in your mind, and they cannot both be true. You do not realize how completely different these evaluations are because you do not understand how lofty the Holy Spirit's perception of you really is. He is not deceived in anything you do because he never forgets what you are, which is love. The ego is deceived by everything you do, especially when you respond to the Holy Spirit, because at such times, the ego's confusion increases. It's therefore particularly likely to attack you when you react lovingly, because it has evaluated you as unloving and you are going against its judgment. The ego will attack your motives as soon as they become clearly out of accord with its perception of you. This is when it will shift abruptly from suspiciousness to viciousness, since its uncertainty is increased. Yet it's surely pointless to attack in return. What can this mean except that you are agreeing with the evaluations of what the ego says that you are? If you choose to see yourself as unloving, you will not be happy. If you choose to see yourself as unloving, you will not be happy. You're condemning yourself and must therefore regard yourself as inadequate. Would you look to the ego to help you escape from this inadequacy it has produced and must maintain for its existence? Can you escape from the ego's evaluation of you by using its methods for keeping this picture intact? You cannot evaluate an insane belief system from within it. Wow. You can only go beyond it, look back from a point where sanity exists and see its contrast. Only by this contrast can insanity be judged as insane. With grandeur of God in you, you have chosen to belittle and to lament your littleness, which is not true. You are not little, but that's the choice that we make. Within the system that dictated this choice, the lament is inevitable. Your littleness is taken for granted there, and you do not ask who granted it. The question is meaningless within the ego's thought system because it would open the whole thought system to question. Jesus is talking here, and he says, I have said that the ego does not know what the real question is. And that question, which is earlier in the book, is, what are you? Lack of knowledge of any kind is always associated with unwillingness to know. And this produces a total lack of knowledge simply because knowledge is total. It's the be all and the end all. Not to question your littleness, therefore, is to deny all knowledge and keep the ego's whole thought system intact. The Holy Spirit judges against the reality of the ego's thought system merely because he knows its foundation is not true. Therefore, nothing that arises from it means anything. The Holy Spirit judges every belief you hold in terms of where it comes from. If it comes from God, he knows it to be true. If it does not, the Holy Spirit knows it to be meaningless. Whenever you question your value, say, God himself is incomplete without me. The truth about you is so lofty that nothing unworthy of God is worthy of you. Anything unworthy of God is not real. Not real. And every human being walking this earth, even the people we don't like, are creations of God. They are creations of God. Ideas that were created, they're real them. Now, maybe right now they're operating as something that is so far away from the concept of God, but the true them God created. And God himself is incomplete without that real person, that real person. So now we are at grandeur versus grandiosity. And one is of God and the Holy Spirit and of Jesus, and the other is of our ego. And the thing is that, you know, it's very hard, I think, to walk through this world. And it takes practice. It takes commitment to our spiritual relationship with God to not let the world affect us. And I think that it's very hard to walk through this world. It can be anyway, and not be affected, not be affected by things that, you know, our human self sees as unfair or not true, or wants to pass judgment on. All of that is really coming from our ego. If it's not love, it's not God. If it's not love, it's not God. So I'm going to share some of the important points of this section, grandeur versus grandiosity. And it starts out, grandeur is of God and only of Him. Therefore, it is in you. Whenever you become aware of it, however dimly, you abandon the ego automatically, because in the presence of the grandeur of God, the meaninglessness of the ego becomes perfectly apparent. Woo. When this occurs, even though it does not understand it, the ego believes that this is its enemy. This its enemy has struck and attempts to offer gifts to induce you to return to protection. So the ego's like, whoa, 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 whoa. No, 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 no. Self-inflation is the only offering the ego can make. The grandiosity of the ego is its alternative to the grandeur of God. Which will you choose? Grandiosity is always a cover for despair. It is without hope because it's not real. It's an attempt to counteract your littleness based on the belief that littleness is real. But littleness isn't real because you're not little. But the ego would have us believe that we are small. Without this belief, grandiosity is meaningless, and you could not possibly want it. I, Jesus, told you that the ego is aware of threat to its existence, but makes no distinctions between these two different kinds of threats. Its profound sense of vulnerability renders it incapable of judgment except in terms of attack. When the ego experiences threat, its only decision is whether to attack now or withdraw to attack later. And I find that so interesting because it's so true. I mean, we know people like that. We might attack their ego in some kind of way. They might react instantly, or they might just be like this. But then later on, they're coming back. There's some kind of retaliation. If you accept its offer of grandiosity, the ego, it will attack immediately. If you don't, it will wait. The ego is immobilized in the presence of God's grandeur, because His grandeur establishes your freedom. God's grandeur, which is who you really are, the idea, like if you start understanding and believing and knowing you're a holy loved child of God, you are love. You are love. You don't have anything to fear because God is going to work this out. If you start believing in this, this establishes your freedom. And you know what? I was with a cousin today who's in a really wonderful place, and he was talking about just awarenesses, and something he said that I just was like, this is so true. Once you understand that you're free, once you accept that you're free, you're free. Once you accept that you're free, you're free. The ego will make every effort to recover and mobilize its energies against your release. So, we'll start hearing this voice. You're not free. You're not all of that. What made you think you all of that? You ain't all of that. Look at that person over there. You don't even compare to that person. That's the ego, that little whisper in our eyes. It will tell you that you are insane and argue that grandeur cannot be a real part of you because of the littleness in which it believes. Yet your grandeur is not delusional because you didn't make your grandeur. We didn't create ourselves. We didn't create ourselves. It's God who made us so wonderful. It's God who did this. It's not like we created ourselves and we're like, oh, look at what I did. God did this. God did this. Your grandeur is not delusional because you did not make it. You made grandiosity, this fake thing that our ego will tell us that we are. This thing that we did. Oh, I did all this work and look what I did. Look at what I accomplished. That's our grandiosity. You made grandiosity and are afraid of it because it is a form of attack. But your grandeur is of God, who created it out of his love. From your grandeur, you can bless. From your grandeur, you can bless because your grandeur is your abundance. By blessing, you hold it in your mind, protecting it from illusions and keeping yourself in the mind of God. Remember always that you cannot be anywhere except in the mind of God, the consciousness of God. We never leave God's consciousness, although he might leave our mind as we go about the doings of our day. We never leave God's consciousness. When you forget this, you will despair and you will attack. The ego depends solely on your willingness to tolerate it. If you are willing to look upon your grandeur, you cannot despair, and therefore you cannot want the ego. So we can be more determined to ignore that voice, that egoic voice that will come up. Your grandeur is God's answer to the ego because it is true. Littleness and grandeur cannot coexist, nor is it possible for them to alternate. You are altogether irreplaceable in the mind of God. No one else can fill your part in it. And while you leave your part of it empty, your eternal place merely waits for your return. Your value is in God's mind and therefore not in yours alone. To accept yourself as God created, you cannot be arrogance because it is the denial of arrogance. As God created us, there's no arrogance around that because it is the denial of arrogance, our mere existence and our true reality. To accept your littleness is arrogant because it means that you believe your evaluation of yourself is more true than God's. Okay, it's the last paragraph. Yet the truth is indivisible. Your evaluation of yourself must be God's. You did not establish your value, and it needs no defense. Nothing can attack it or prevail over it. It does not vary. The truth of you, the holy part of you does not vary. It merely is. Ask the Holy Spirit what it is, and he will tell you, but do not be afraid of his answer because it only comes from God. I mean, we really are called on to accept our true greatness, And our true greatness would not hurt someone else. Our true greatness would not hurt someone else. Listen and do not question what you hear, for God does not deceive. He would have you replace the ego's belief in littleness with his own exalted answer to what you are, so that you can cease to question it and know it for what it is. The essence of it is to accept who we are. And I'm going to try to find that quote by Marianne Williamson that uh, has been attributed to Nelson Mandela, and I think it's even been attributed to John F. Kennedy. And it actually came from Marianne Williamson that speaks to this. And that is our deepest fear. She says in this poem, I won't read the whole poem, I'll just read the quote. Our deepest fear is not that we are inadequate. Our deepest fear is that we are powerful beyond measure. It is our light, not our darkness, that most frightens us. It is our light, not our darkness, that most frightens us. And wow, I'm feeling so much around all of this at this moment, and I'm not gonna go too much deeper, but it is bringing me to that section of A Course in Miracles that talks about redemption from fear, and it is love that we are so afraid of, and not hate. It is love that we're afraid of, because we know ultimately that it says in this book that brought me so much comfort in this section I'm referring to, that we can only go so far into hate or destruction or just denial, whatever, horror. We can only go so far, because we will always come to a point of the realization of God's love. And that is what we are so afraid of. We're so afraid of that. And we're more comfortable in anger and fear and doubt. You know, that's a comfortable, familiar place. But, and then out of that, we may come up in our ego, and that'll be grandiosity. But that's not lasting. That's not lasting. Who you truly are, is lasting. And that's in a space of grandeur, and that's in God. That is in God. And whenever we choose to meditate, be still, be in a space that really brings us peace for an extended period of time, we're listening to something that really connects us with God. It could be a song, it could be a moment that we're having with a loved one, and we really understand that this is something that is higher than our human selves. That's when we know what's real. That's when we feel within ourselves what's real. Well, thank you for joining me. We have more in common than we think, and what we have in common can indeed change the world. It can indeed change the world. And it is about connecting with that love inside us, with that passion inside of us, to know that that passion that we feel, that love that we feel inside, that's the will of God. And that will guide us to how we serve, to how we grow and expand. Until next time, let's start healing.